Okay, so we're recording.
Yep, we're recording and we are now live. And the participants are coming in. So welcome everybody to July's Backyard Forestry in 90 minutes. We're gonna start on just a couple of minutes. So welcome. If you have any questions or you wanna make any comments, you can drop those in for now and we'll go over all the housekeeping stuff in just a couple of minutes.
I guess people are probably going to wait till right at 7 o'clock and sometimes a little bit later. So I see the count going up.
Yep, we're going up steadily. Mute my phone here.
I think I got most of the shadows off of my face. So.
Right. Yeah, the joys of all this webinar stuff. I feel like I've learned so much about studio lighting. And like,
yeah, we've all learned a lot about technology and yeah, things you never even wanted to know.
how much noise our neighbors make. You know, you're recording a webinar and 40 minutes in, somebody starts a lawnmower.
Yeah.
That's been a joy.
I have 3 webinars tomorrow.
Oh, awesome.
9, 10, and 12.
Yeah, I still have a lot. They're still happening all the time, I feel like.
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages even when things open up.
Right. So, all right, I got 7:01, so I think we can go ahead and get started so we're not wasting anybody's time here. So welcome everybody once again to this month's Backyard Forestry in 90 minutes. My name is Kieran Hunt. I am a member of the board of directors for the New Jersey Forestry Association. And with me is our president, Andy Kim, and Amy Rowe, our speaker. So before we get into the webinar, I just want to go into a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you want to chat or make any general comments, you can go ahead and put those in the chat box. But once again, the questions are best put in the Q&A. I try to keep an eye out for questions in the chat as well. So if you drop them in there by mistake, I should catch them, but we're more likely to see them if you put them right into the Q&A. And for anybody who's wondering, this month Lori is on vacation. So I'm running the Zoom for her this month. So please forgive me if I make any small errors. I'm doing my best here. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do this right. Okay. And I want to do my video mirroring here. Can you see all right, or are you seeing my presenter mode?
We've got the Welcome Backyard Forestry in 90 minutes online screen.
Okay, good. So with that, I will introduce our president, Andy Kim, and you can go ahead and do our introduction for us, Andy.
Okay, you can move to the next one if you would, Kieran. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. Once again, it's the July version of Backyard Forestry Online, and we're very happy to have Amy Rowe back. Our next meeting will be on August 19th. The topic will be announced soon. One thing that we do encourage people, if there's a particular topic that you think would be of interest to you and others, you can throw that in the chat, or you can send us an email, and we would be happy to consider other topics that would be interest to the audience. Again, if you're a member of the New Jersey Forestry Association, or if you're not a member, would like to, there are a number of things that we do provide. You'll see we have the newsletters that come out quarterly. We have a website, annual meeting, which we did virtually this year. Hopefully in 2022, we'll be able to meet in person again. The Woodland Storage Program, we're still wrestling with how to do that. That's usually a 3.5-day program that takes part at Camp Linwood McDonald up in North Jersey. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work this year. We're not sure what the camp status is. And we don't know yet whether people would want to spend 3.5 days in a camp situation. So we're wrestling with how to do that one. Backyard Forestry in 90 minutes, of course, is this. Landowner representation. We recently joined the New Jersey Green Industry Council so that we will get more up-to-date information on pending legislation. And we do have a lobbyist that helps us with interesting legislation that our members may want to know about, and that's part of the legislative monitor. So for non-woodland owners, of course, you get the fresh air, clean water, recreation, wildlife habitat, and forestry education, which is what this is all about, because an awful lot of the people who participate in backyard forestry are interested in the education. So that's part of what we do, and because we're doing that, that's part of what we want to instill in people. We do a lot. We'd like you to join. The membership is $55 a year, so it does get you a lot of information that we hope you will enjoy and can use. Forest stewardship, we've seen this before. Forest stewardship is the wise management use of our forest resources to ensure their health and productivity for years to come. Years to come is important. And from the New Jersey Forest Stewardship Act that went into effect a couple years ago, management of the forest land and its natural resources shall be based on the principle of conservation. That is, the plan shall be designed to sustain the productivity of the forest land and its natural resources in perpetuity, and that in perpetuity is particularly important. We want our forests to be around for a long, long time. So if you're not a member, we certainly encourage you to join. Just go to www.njforestry.org. Information is on that website. We certainly would encourage you to become a member if you are not yet a member. Kieran, take it away.
Thanks, Andy. And with that, I will introduce our speaker for tonight, Amy Rowe, who's going to talk to us about a much requested topic, rain gardens. So you can take it away, Amy. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share.
Okay, well, thank you, Kieran and Andy, and thank you everyone for joining on this hot, sticky summer day. Let me start sharing my screen. If you're not familiar, I'm Amy Rowe from Rutgers Cooperative Extension. I'm stationed in Essex and Passaic counties. And if you don't know Extension, we are the outreach arm of the university. So we bring the research from main campus out into the local communities. And we do all kinds of things. And our main goal is education. And so happy to join as part of our mission today. And I'm going to be talking about rain gardens. I'm going to cover a lot of material very quickly. Hold on, let me get to slideshow mode. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me move some things out of the way. Please don't be shy with questions. But yeah, I'm going to cover a lot. I usually give this talk in 3 hours. So yeah, let's just cut to the chase here and talk about what rain gardens are, how to design and plan them, and how to install, all very superficially. So please don't be shy with the questions. I'm here for you and would love to help people get these in the ground. So let's start with, what is a rain garden? A rain garden is simply a shallow landscape depression that collects and treats stormwater runoff. So it's basically just a small, like a bowl-shaped depression in a landscape, and it is meant to capture stormwater at the source and to manage that stormwater, both in stormwater water quantity as well as improving water quality, while also being aesthetically pleasing. So this is not a pond, it's not a pool, it's not a water hazard. these rain gardens need to be draining within 24 to 48 hours. We are not breeding mosquitoes. We are not housing fish. This is something that is managing stormwater and infiltrating it quickly. And we'll get into the science behind rain gardens in a couple slides. But basically, rain gardens can be as natural and as seamlessly integrating into the environment as you want, or they could be manicured and as professional as an English looking formal garden. It's really up to you as the designer and whoever the property owner is, depending on what you want to do. Rain gardens are very flexible. We do have a lot of plant recommendations, and I'll get to that at the end, because there are different plants that are right for the different zones of the rain garden, and we'll get into this. But basically, the water gets into the rain gardens through any typical conveyance means. So it could be a pipe, it could be a swale, it could be a curb cut, it could be a downspout. There are all kinds of ways to get the water from wherever you don't want it into your rain garden. Okay, so here is a schematic of a rain garden. There are 3 different zones in that rain garden. So you have the base, which is where the heavy lifting is done. This is the main drainage area of your rain garden. It is infiltrating most of the water. The plants that are in this zone are not full wetland plants. You are looking for plants that like wet feet, but in general, this is going to be a dry zone. If it's not actively raining, this is draining within 24 hours. So you need plants that have some water tolerance, but again, are mostly happy in a dry area. Then you have the slope, which is here on this angle. This is a transition zone. So you're looking for plants that mostly like it dry, but can handle wet conditions. And then in the buffer, these are mostly upland plants. They are looking for dry conditions. So this will be a guide to what plants you're going to put in each of these zones. And please notice that the typical depth of the rain garden is 3 to 8 inches. We are not going down feet. This is just a couple inches to handle a 1 inch or 1 1/4 inch rain event. We are not, we're not holding back, the 100-year storm. This is small scale. We are trying to manage stormwater at the local level and to improve water quality at these small scales, because 90% of our rainfall events, well, in the past, things are changing a little bit with climate change, but in general, it used to be that 90% of our rain events were 1 inch or less. And so we are trying to capture that storm event and not, we can't handle Hurricane Sandy or anything that's major rainfall. But this will help us manage localized flooding and to improve water quality. And we'll get to that in a minute. But 2 other things that are very important for your rain garden is that you need to have an inlet. Again, this could be a curb cut, a pipe, a downspout, and then you need to have an outlet. You need to have some place for this rain garden to overflow so that you are directing water where you want it to go and not just flooding your whole property during those heavy rain events. And so I'll talk to you about that a little later, but these are the parts of the rain garden, and this design will drive the plant decisions and all of these things. Okay, so here's another version of the rain garden schematic, just a little more detail. I'm not going to go into everything here. You can certainly read it, but on this graphic, they are showing the source of the water. So you have a building on the left-hand side. You have the roof, you have a downspout. Here's the water coming into the inlet. And then on the opposite side, you have the overflow. And then you have a berm, which is a a soil or dirt mound that is acting as a barrier on the side opposite the inlet. You're trying to keep the water where you want it to go in that infiltration bed at the base of the rain garden. So that berm is just keeping the water in the rain garden, except for the overflow or outlet that gives it that emergency exit. Okay, so why install rain gardens? What are the benefits? Well, rain gardens are incredibly efficient at infiltrating stormwater before it becomes a problem. If you live just about anywhere in the past, couple of weeks in New Jersey, I don't know who we have from other states, but in New Jersey, we have received a lot of rainfall in a relatively short amount of time. We've had inches and inches of rain, and that water needs a place to go because of all of our impervious cover, all those surfaces that don't allow water to infiltrate. So a rain garden can capture some of that water, infiltrate it before it even becomes stormwater and becomes a problem. But aside from that, the rain garden can remove contaminants very, very efficiently also. So we're talking metals, we're talking solids, we're talking some organics, even things like microbial things like bacteria, and I'll get to that in a slide or two. But these installations are basically acting as filters because you have, let's just say, your mulch layer, you have your soil layer, you have the plants themselves, which provide some uptake, and then you have the shallow infiltration and then deep infiltration. And as that water moves through all of these layers, you have contaminant removal. And so this is great, not just for the water quantity benefits, but also, again, improving water quality. Rain gardens can also be used to prevent wet areas on your property. You are not going to install a rain garden where you have a wet spot. This is a little counterintuitive. You don't want your rain garden to be where you have terrible drainage. Your rain garden needs to be draining within 24 to 48 hours because it's not a water hazard. We're not breeding mosquitoes. This needs to be infiltrating quickly. So if you put your rain garden in a spot that's capturing the water that's leading to the poor drainage area, then you can improve the conditions on that spot of your property. So you're preventing that poor drainage by capturing the water before it gets to that poorly infiltrating area. And then another benefit of rain gardens is that they're very flexible. They can be as small or as large as you want them to be. They can be incorporated into just about any location. I've installed, I don't know, at least 10 rain gardens in Newark on abandoned lots that have been adopted by different people across the city. The smallest rain garden I've ever installed was 70 square feet, a little 7 by 10. I call it my pocket rain garden. But then there are also really impressive, huge rain gardens. The largest one that I've been involved in was 2,000 square feet in Maplewood. And so these can be very flexible, very adaptive. And again, they're helping you manage stormwater on your property or wherever you're installing it. And it does have a lot of these benefits. Kieran, please stop if there's a lot of questions or if anybody needs clarification, but I'll just keep going till I hear from you. So not to totally beat your head in on this, but what these rain gardens are doing, they're capturing runoff. They are infiltrating water down into the soil, and you have filtration as everything moves through. And so not only are you improving the water quality, but you're also preventing stormwater from going down the storm sewer, and you are reducing the load on our infrastructure. And so there are all kinds of benefits, and this is also aesthetically pleasing compared to a detention basin or what we typically call gray infrastructure, everything that's concrete and pipes. This is something that's providing habitat for our birds and for our pollinators. And so it's not just the water quality and water management benefits. We're also providing food sources and structure for our ecosystems and our local biota here. Okay, so I mentioned this briefly about how efficient rain gardens are at removing all kinds of contaminants. So you have metals and phosphorus that are absorbed to soil particles. The plants themselves uptake nutrients, so nitrogen and phosphorus, which, as you may know, are a huge contributor to the algae problems that we have in our waterways and eutrophication. So any uptake of nutrients is definitely a win. Then we have the removal of organics and pathogens because the microbes in the soil and in the mulch and all the amendments to your rain garden that you're adding can really break down those stubborn organic contaminants, as well as eating those pathogens, so things like E. coli, fecal coliform, anything like that. Also, placing your rain garden in a sunny spot can also lead to the removal of pathogens because they are broken down by those UV rays. And then you have the whole system acting like a filter, as I mentioned before. So you have solids removal, you have the larger scale removal of solids in terms of capturing water bottles and trash and anything floating, especially if your rain garden is in an urban environment. And then, as I mentioned, you are mitigating flooding at the small scale. And then you're also providing groundwater recharge and making sure that our rainfall is participating correctly in the water cycle here. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna do some math. I don't want to break your brain at 7 o'clock in the evening on a Thursday. I'm sure everybody's tired, but you can go through all this. I'm not going to read it all to you, but as I had said previously, the research has shown that 90% of rainfall events are less than 1 inch. New Jersey, on average, is receiving 44 inches of rain per year. Again, climate change is pushing that up a little bit, but we're just using that for now. So 90% of 44 inches is 40 inches of rain per year. And let's just say that our typical rain garden is draining 1,000 square feet of runoff. So the total volume that's treated by that rain garden is 1,000 square feet times 3.3 feet per year. So that's 3,300 cubic feet, which is 25,000 gallons per year. So one small residential rain garden is infiltrating 25,000 gallons of stormwater right at the source, right at your house, or right at your municipal property, or right near your wooded lot, wherever you're putting this rain garden. So if just 40 people, I think I saw at least 50 people on this webinar, if everybody installs a rain garden somewhere, then we will have more than 1 million gallons of water treated per year, just with the people on this webinar. So this is actually a pretty decent impact compared to some other practices. Some people have a rain barrel, and rain barrels are great, but rain barrels are capturing 50 gallons of water max at a time, and that usually overflows during any rain event. Where a rain garden is much more efficient and can capture much more storm water. So we can really have some impact if everyone installs one of these. Okay, so switching gears, we are going to dive into design and site specifications for a rain garden. You guys may know my colleague, Dr. Chris Abrupta. He is the Water Resources Extension Specialist for Rutgers, and This is the rain garden at his house, and much of this presentation came from his material. I'll acknowledge him later, but this is something that can be installed at any house, any municipal building, any woodlot, any adopt a lot in Newark. These things are very flexible, they're adaptable, and they are a way for us to handle climate change and to handle the more and more rainfall and stormwater that we're going to be dealing with in the coming years. So let's get into it. So how do you install a rain garden? 3 simple steps: planning, installation, and maintenance. Yeah, it's that easy, right? So when you are planning, you should figure out a hypothetical site. You should visit that site, observe that site, and then we're going to do some design calculations. Again, I was telling Kieran before we started that I have taught this as a 3-hour lecture. I have taught this as a 2-day workshop. We have all kinds of nitty-gritty details to get to you if you have questions, but we're doing a quick overview, so I'm not going to get too deep. But some things you should consider in terms of where your rain garden is going. You need to be at least 10 feet from a house or a building that has a foundation. You don't want to infiltrate your rain garden right into your basement, right into your infrastructure. So please be aware of that. Do not place your rain garden over your septic system. You may think that would be a good idea, but you don't want to overwhelm your septic. Again, we already talked about not putting your rain garden where you have drainage issues already. And then we do recommend full or partial sunlight as a first option. Again, because of the pathogen breakdown and things like that, but also because you'll have a greater variety of plants to choose from if you have full or partial sunlight. Now, as you guys are from the New Jersey Forestry Association, we have plenty of options for shady areas also. But again, your palette is much larger with some sunlight. So just keep that in mind. If you are digging this yourself, flat area is much easier than anything with a slope, although these can be installed on a sloped area, and I can send you some information on how to do that. And then finally, you really want to avoid installing this anywhere near trees. Trees are our original stormwater management tool. They are uptaking more water than anything else you could put out there. So please don't damage trees while you are trying to get your rain garden in. Don't try to force it. Really try to stay out of the drip line of the trees on your property or on the area that you're going to be installing. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to identify your drainage area. So will you be directing water from a rooftop or from a parking lot or your driveway? You really need to have some kind of water source for your rain garden. Otherwise, it's just a garden. If you don't have any water going into it, then it's not really a rain garden. So take a look around at the site, see what water you want to manage. Most rain gardens are handling rooftop runoff, which is very easy to calculate drainage area. I'll get to that in a little bit. But parking lots and driveways are also a drainage area that people are installing these through also. So just consider that. You may need to install a curb cut. This is at the Monmouth County Extension Office. So here the curb was cut to down below, and you can see the finished product. This is just a footbridge over the inlet here. Some people can't mentally comprehend what this is a picture of, but the curb cut is coming down here and the water is flowing under this footbridge. And then here is the rain garden immediately after a rain event. Again, this water was drained within 24 hours, but this is what it looks like right after the rainfall. It's okay, it'll infiltrate. So make sure that you're also aware of where you have drainage problems on the property, because again, we want to avoid those. Don't install your rain garden where you have drainage issues. Be sure you know what's happening with the landscaping at your property. Whether it's you, our NJNLA friends are here. If you are managing the landscaping in terms of mowing and property management, then that's not a problem. But if you are installing this rain garden and you don't know who's mowing the lawn and who might not know what you're doing, be sure to talk to them. Unfortunately, I had our rain garden completely mowed under at the VA hospital in East Orange. We had some miscommunication and some lack of communication, and it was not good all around. So just be aware of who's doing what and be sure to communicate with people. Then go to the site when it's raining, see how water is flowing, see where it would make sense to install a rain garden so that you don't have to do too much work. In this example, you can see the water is flowing off of this parking lot down into this gully area. So it would be great to install a rain garden there. Rather than in a completely different spot away from the flow. We really want to direct that flow into our rain garden. Okay, so you need to know your drainage area in order to calculate how big your rain garden is going to be. So in this example, there are 2 rooftops that are going to be draining into the rain garden. So you have this one here, you have this one here. You just take the area, add them together, and you have 500 square feet of drainage area. If you don't have a rooftop and you have a parking lot or a driveway, you can estimate based on your impervious surface area, or if you know how, you can use survey equipment to figure out what the drainage area is. You may need a professional surveyor if you don't have that capability. But you can also just look at how the area is draining during a storm to see how the flow will be, and just measure that wet area and then use that as the drainage area. So another thing that's really important is that you need to know your soil type in order to figure out the depth of the rain garden. So if you have clay, if you are up in North Jersey, your rain garden is going to be very shallow, so only 3 inches, because that water needs to spread out across the whole base of the rain garden, and in a very shallow way, to make sure that everything, the whole surface area, is draining across that. If you have a sandy soil, then your rain garden can be deeper because that water is flowing very quickly. With the clay, you're going to have slower infiltration, so it needs to be shallow. And so this is going to play into our design calculations. I'll show you that. So again, this is math. I'm sorry to overwhelm you if your brain's not in that space. But basically, you're going to take your drainage area and your New Jersey design storm, which is 1.25 inches. This is what we're trying to capture. So our rain garden is going to capture 1.25 inch storm event, which again, in the past has covered more than 90% of New Jersey's precipitation events. And then you're going to divide those things by the depth of your rain garden based on the soil type. So we have 500 square feet, which is the drainage area, times 0.1 feet, which is 1.25 inches, the New Jersey design storm, divided by 0.25 feet, that 3 inches for clay. So our rain garden should be 200 square feet. So just to give you a comparative idea, in different soils, even if you have the same drainage area, your rain garden is going to be a different size. So if you have a 500 square foot drainage area, but you have clay soil, you need a 200 square foot rain garden to handle all of that water quickly with this slow infiltration. Where in a loamy soil or a sandy soil, this rain garden is going to be smaller because the soil can infiltrate quicker. So hopefully this makes sense to you, and just here are some other examples so you can kind of see the relative sizing based on the drainage area and the soil type. So with slow draining soils in the clay, the rain garden needs to be bigger to handle that same drainage area and that same storm event. And so hopefully that makes sense. It's a little counterintuitive, but let me know if you have questions. Okay, so what do we need to do? You guys, our landscaping friends, probably already know you need to know where the utility lines are. New Jersey has a hotline. It's called Call Before You Dig. It's 811. You want to make sure that you are not hitting any utility lines. So please call. They're open 24 hours a day. I have tested this. I've called at 3 o'clock in the morning, and yes, they are there, and they will send someone out to mark your utility lines, your cable, the electric, all of those things. So really be careful. You don't want to hit that stuff. Then you want to do a percolation test or a perk test. You guys probably know how to do this. Look at my beautiful graphic that I made for you. Basically, you need to know how quickly your water is going to drain. If you have a proposed rain garden spot, you want to make sure that the drainage is okay. So I have a more detailed list of how to do a perk test, but just so you know, you dig a hole, you fill it with water, you let it drain completely, then you fill it again, and you check the water level every hour for 4 hours. And this will give you the infiltration rate. If your hole for your perk test is not drained completely within 24 hours, please don't put a rain garden there. That's poor drainage. You need at least 1 inch per hour draining, unless you want to have issues and mosquitoes and standing water. So please be careful with this. Please choose a spot that's draining well. The perk test can help you decide. We could get into that in a more advanced training. Another thing you should do, take pictures, document what you're doing. You want to see the changes over time. So don't be shy, take lots of pictures. So you're still planning this. So what else do you need to know? You need to know how many plants you need. This is going to depend on their mature size. It's also going to depend on if you are looking at flowers and perennials, if you're looking at shrubs, if you're looking at trees. So this is just a rule of thumb. Obviously, everyone's garden is going to be different, but just to start out, especially if you are buying small plants or plugs to save money, just be aware of how large these plants are going to be when they are mature. Okay. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard this, right plant, right place. We want you to choose plants that will do well in each of the rain garden zones. So you have your base, which your plants need to tolerate standing water as well as dry conditions. Then you have your slope that needs to be able to mostly be dry, but can also tolerate those wet feet. And then your buffer area is almost completely dry. You're really not having standing water in the buffer zone. So what kinds of plants are we using? At Rutgers, we recommend native plants just so that you have less maintenance, so that you have plants that are already adapted to New Jersey's climate, as well as our pests and our plant diseases. You want to have native plants to also provide our pollinators and our all of our critters, our butterflies, our caterpillars. We want them to have food to eat. They don't necessarily do well on exotics. So please take a look at native plants first. Here are some ideas for the base: marsh marigold, rose mallow, a hibiscus type, irises, blue flag iris does really well in the base. I am going to share with you a link to the New Jersey Rain Garden Manual that has all kinds of plant lists for all kinds of conditions and can give you more ideas. In the slope area, again, mostly dry, but can tolerate those wet conditions. Joe Pye weed is a good one. It's very striking. It can be very tall. And then obedient plant is another one that I like. It's this kind of lavender color. You may want to choose plants based on when they're blooming so that you have some interest year round, not just everything blooming all at once in the spring. You really want to try to provide some food and something to look at for our birds and for those caterpillars. And then in the buffer area, you have lots of options. So here's some that you might like: Black-eyed Susan, bee balm. Hummingbirds really like the bee balm, Monarda. So consider that if you're trying to attract those guys. But there's so many options, and I know as forestry and landscape people, you probably want to talk mostly about the plants, but I'm in a hurry to talk about everything else. So I will send a link to our rain garden manual that Rutgers put out to give you more ideas for the plants. But there are all kinds of fancy ways to put the layout together for where you're going to plant each thing. And if you have access to a landscape architect, I'm sure they could design something beautiful for you. But again, you're looking at mature size, you're looking at bunching plants, you're looking at bloom time. So there's a lot to consider here. And I'm sorry, I'm not a plant person, I'm a chemist. So if you have serious plant questions, I will direct you to some other folks. But yeah, there's some really impressive professional native plant rain gardens out there, and they're just gorgeous compared to my very scientific chemistry, practical engineered rain gardens that don't look as artistically pleasing. But some other things that you may need some river rock to direct the flow. You may need some piping. You may need deer fencing. I'm sure you guys have dealt with deer, and then some hoses, some sprinklers, because believe it or not, you need to water your rain garden until your plants get established. If you're installing it this year, you may not, because it seems to rain every day. But yeah, just don't forget to water, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, I know I'm going really fast. This is a lot of information. It is 7:41. So we're doing okay. Did we want to answer some questions real quick or wait to the end?
I think we can wait till the end. I think they're
Okay.
mostly pretty general. So
Okay, cool. All right. So what are the steps to actually install the rain garden? Well, here they are listed. I'm going to go through each one, but it's really not that bad. You don't need, you don't need an engineer. If you have something very complicated, I would recommend one. But again, any homeowner can install this. It's not that difficult, and let's just go through. So the bane of everyone's existence: remove the existing grass. You need to get that turf up. But one thing that you can do with it is use any turf that you removed for the berm. So don't throw it away. You can reuse it later. I'll show you an example of the berm. But yeah, the first thing you need to do is clear that spot. And I'm sure this is everybody's favorite activity, especially the landscapers that are with us. But yeah, you get rid of that grass, pull that up and flip it over, and we'll use it for the berm later. I'll show you. Then you need to excavate to the desired grade and elevation. So remember that our little rain garden, based on our soil type, it's only 3 inches deep, it's only 6 inches deep, or it's only 8 inches deep, depending on the soil type you have. So that's great. Okay, that's a shallow depression, but you need to make sure that it is uniform across that base and ponding area, and we'll get to that in a minute. First, you need to excavate. You'll do the smoothing later. But just keep in mind how deep you need to go. And here's Chris Abrupta here in the middle here, and then former colleague Greg doing some measurements and trying to figure out how deep to go. It's not horrible if you end up a little deeper than you should. You can just backfill, or you can add some soil amendments if you need to, like sand or compost. I didn't want to get into all of that, but there are things that can be added to improve infiltration. So yeah, just make sure that you're getting down to the right height, the right elevation, the right grade. We'll talk about smoothing in a couple steps here. So at this point, you're going to prepare the berm. So take all of the turf that you removed and flip it over and use it as that berm on the side across from your inlet. So you want to keep all of that water in the rain garden, except for that outlet, that overflow, which I'll show you in a minute. So you can see all of the soil being piled up here and flipping over the turf grass and just providing that barrier to prevent that water from just flowing straight into the rest of your property. You want to keep it in the rain garden. You may need to tamp it down, really make it a secure barrier. Okay, so now you're going to prepare the overflow. This could be a pipe in your rain garden out the berm, put that pipe, across from the inlet. You want that water to be able to spread out as much as possible before it hits the overflow. But it could be river rock, it could be a pipe. It's just an outlet to give that water someplace to go when we're having a really large rain event. Again, our rain gardens are sized for 1 1/4 inches. So if we're getting more than that, you want to direct the flow rather than having it, backflow into the foundation of the house or someplace that it's not supposed to be. So this is just a way to direct that flow to where you want it to go. If you are in a place that has some infrastructure, you can even connect your overflow to existing drainage. So if there is a pipe nearby or some other drain, maybe you're close to the street, anything like that, you may be able to connect into existing infrastructure for your overflow. So consider that as well. Okay, so now you're going to level that base of the rain garden. It needs to be level so that you don't have preferential flow, you don't have gullying, and you want your rain garden to spread the flow evenly across the whole area so that it infiltrates uniformly, so that you are draining as much stormwater as possible. Whereas if you have lumps and bumps in there and you have craters, then the water is going to flow to that spot and nowhere else, and it'll be really wet there. And then the rest of the plants and the rest of everything else isn't getting any water. So be sure to level that as much as possible. This picture is of a string level. I'm sure you guys have seen that before. It's really handy when you are trying to figure out how uniform your ponding area is. But yeah, really take some time on this piece. You need your rain garden to be evenly distributing that water across the entire area of the rain garden. I know it's tricky, but it's worth the time. Okay, now's the fun part. Now you plant the plants. I'm sure you guys all know how to plant plants, but I give this talk to everybody from, basic people that don't even know, one end of a plant from another. So excuse the really simplistic pictures here, but you want to cut your root ball, make sure that your plants are not root bound. And then also, again, make sure that the hole that you dig is as deep as the root ball. I'm sure you guys know this, but you wouldn't believe how many community members out there don't know how to plant a plant. Because rain gardens really lend themselves to community involvement. Like sometimes you've got the scouts involved, sometimes you have the school, sometimes it's just a community day. And so you really need to guide people and make sure that they're planting your plants the way that they should. So keep an eye on everybody. And then you're gonna water the plants. I know this doesn't make any sense. You are watering your rain garden, but again, especially if you are planting plugs that are very small, they're very cost efficient, but they are small and they don't have a lot of roots. You really need to water them in, get them established, make sure that everybody's healthy, and hope for rain so you don't have to water them as much. But again, until everything's established, you are going to have to water. This system is a drip irrigation. You may consider that if you have the resources just to get everybody watered down at their roots. But yeah, don't forget to water your rain garden, as backwards as that sounds. Okay, so we ran through a lot here. But now we need to get into maintenance, because rain gardens are relatively low maintenance, but they are not no maintenance. You cannot just walk away from this. You need to pay attention. So there are short-term activities and there are long-term activities. So let's just go through these quickly. We just went over the watering. I don't need to harp on that, but don't forget it. Weeding is also very important, especially the year that you have planted. Especially in a year where you have a lot of rainfall. I'm sure you guys, if you're in your gardens, you've noticed the weeds are going crazy this year. If you don't know what's a weed and what was planted, Rutgers Cooperative Extension has a weed gallery. USDA also has a plants database, and you can take a look at those. Especially if you are designing and planting your rain garden, you may want to leave a design or a plant list with whoever will be maintaining it. Maybe it's not you. And so that way that'll give them an idea of what's a weed and what's not, what's supposed to be there, what's not. But yeah, weeding is really important for any garden. But in this rain garden, excuse me, you really want to get in there and weed, watch out for those really aggressive species. And yeah, just keep your rain garden clean and tidy, and try not to have all those weeds, because it can become difficult to decide what's supposed to be there and what's not. Okay, so another thing that you need to do is watch your rain garden. Make sure that after it's planted and after you've installed it, take a look at what happens after rain events. Are there any uprooted plants? Has all the mulch washed away? Is there preferential flow in the rain garden? And address those issues as they come up. Don't let them go too long, or your rain garden will not be functioning properly. We don't want standing water. We don't want mosquitoes. We don't want water hazards. So really take a look. See what's happening out there. You may need to adjust your inlet. You may need to slow the flow down. Maybe you need to add some river rock so that things are not flowing so quickly and blowing out the inlet. Just take a look. There's all kinds of issues that may be popping up, but if you're observing, you can address them quickly and get your rain garden back on track. Again, keep up with your pictures, keep an eye on what's happening and look at your progress. It's nice to see how your plants have been established and how things are coming along. So keep up with that. And then in the long term, you need to weed also. So not just when you're planting your rain garden and the first year, but you really need to look out for those long-term issues. And again, communicate with whoever is maintaining this. It may be you, it may not be, it may be someone at your company, but be clear. In this picture on the left, I'm embarrassed to say that this is a rain garden in Newark that Rutgers installed, that we thought the city of Newark was maintaining. The city of Newark thought Rutgers was maintaining, and as you can see, the weeds are taller than this pine tree. It's really embarrassing that we miscommunicated, and you can't even tell that there's a rain garden here, which is also depressing and embarrassing. So keep on top of this, look for those invasive species, get them out of there as soon as possible. You may see Japanese knotweed, which really likes wet areas. You may see thistle, many different types of thistle out there, the bane of every gardener's existence. But yeah, please don't let the weeding go. You don't want to be overwhelmed, and you don't want to lose your rain garden plants among all the weeds. So keep up with that. Then there's pruning. You are going to be installing rain garden plants that will like to spread, that will like to take over, that will really become thick, and they may start to get away from you. So you may need to weed, and prune. So there are different types of pruning, as all of you landscape guys probably know. There's thinning, there's heading, and depending on the type of pruning you do, the growth will be different as it comes back in. This is especially important if you're planting shrubs or trees in your rain garden, which are both of those things are possible. It just depends on the conditions and what's happening and what you're trying to achieve. So consider that, keep on top of that. Make sure your shrubs and trees don't get away from you either. Okay, so another thing you need to keep up with in the long term is the debris and all of the sediment that's going to be collected in your rain garden. So remember, the rain garden is acting as a filter. So on top of the filter is going to be everything that you're collecting. So if you're in an urban setting, there may be things like water bottles, cigarette butts, plastic packaging. I mean, we found all kinds of things in our urban rain gardens, but you may also end up with this sediment layer on top of the soil and on top of the rain garden, that it's almost like a thatch, but it's made out of like your mulch and all of the particles that are being captured by the rain garden. So you need to remove that to allow infiltration to continue. If you leave that thatchy, impervious layer, your rain garden will not be able to drain the stormwater that it's receiving. Excuse me. So make sure that at least once a year, usually right after the winter in the early spring, and then you can also do it in the fall after the leaves have dropped, to really rake that out and pull up that layer so that your rain garden is infiltrating. Okay, if you have ornamental grasses, you may need to mow or weed whack your rain garden. So take a look at that. I'm not gonna harp on this, but ornamental grasses are a great option for something a little more permanent. Like perennials are awesome, but if you want something that also has like a winter presence and provides some interest during the colder months, then think about ornamental grasses and leave them during the winter months. But in the early spring, you may want to mow or trim those with the string trimmer. So think about that also. Keep up with your journal, you get the idea. Now, a little bit of troubleshooting, what needs to be done in the long term in terms of maintenance. You may need to remove or replace plants. Some plants may not have made it through the winter. Some plants may be so prolific that you need to replace them. You need to divide them. Maybe you just need to thin them, share them with your friends that have rain gardens or regular gardens. Just, you may need to really thin everything. But maybe the water flowing in your rain garden was displacing some of the mulch that you put down or moving some of the rocks. So you may need to replace those materials. So take a look at that. Take a look at the berm. Is it still acting as a berm? Is it completely exposed and is starting to erode? You may need to seed it with grass if you want. at the VA rain garden, the veterans I was working with wanted to put dusty millers all over the berm, and it looked really cool. And they held the soil, and it was something I never would have thought of. So consider keeping your berm in place by planting that as well. Okay. Harvest cuttings. Again, you can have a plant swap with all the stuff that's going to be coming out of your rain garden after it's been established for a couple years. Again, the irises, the monarda, the bee balm, echinacea, the coneflower may really start to take over, and you want to thin them out. So you can give them away. You can have a rain garden plant swap with your friends. Collect the seeds. You can use those for your next rain garden. It's just a thing that keeps on giving. Your rain garden will really establish itself and will be successful, and will be ready to provide you with plants for your next installation. You may need to apply new mulch. Mulch doesn't last forever, and in New Jersey, mulch is highly prized. Don't make any mulch volcanoes around your trees and shrubs, but yeah, most landscapes have a mulch covering, and your rain garden can also have a mulch covering. You may need to reapply it every couple years, so keep that in mind in terms of your budget. And then another thing you need to think of in the long term for maintenance is whatever your inlet is, make sure that it's cleared out. You are collecting from a roof with a gutter and a downspout. Maybe you're collecting from a curb cut in a parking lot. Make sure that inlet is flowing. Otherwise, your rain garden isn't going to be receiving water. So really clear that debris. And just keep up with it. You do not want plants growing out of your gutters like this cartoon. But yeah, take a look at that. Make sure birds aren't nesting up there, or mice, and just keep that inlet clear, keep that water flowing, get that water to your plants and into your rain garden. Okay, another thing to think about. Please make sure your rain garden is draining within 24 to 48 hours. When Rutgers first started with the rain garden program, we really had quite an issue with the Mosquito Control Commission across the state in different counties. They thought that we were breeding mosquitoes, and we had some rain gardens that were not installed properly that were breeding mosquitoes. So again, it's not just rain gardens that aren't draining. Make sure that all of the things in your yard or on the property are not collecting water. Mosquitoes can breed in a bottle cap full of water. They do not need a lot of water. So just be aware of standing water. Try to make sure your rain garden is draining quickly and efficiently. If it's not, please call Rutgers, call your extension office. We will help you, we will fix it. It can be fixed retroactively. You don't have to give up completely. We've got some tools and tricks, and we can talk about that in advanced topics, but please keep an eye on your drainage and the mosquitoes. Okay. Deer are always going to be a problem. I am sure this is not news to anyone. When your plants are first getting established, you may need to put up deer fencing. I don't know what to tell you. We recommend using native plants, which are like a deer buffet. Native plants have co-evolved with deer forever. So deer actually prefer native plants to the exotics. So please consider this, consider the location of your rain garden in terms of the deer pressure. I don't have any real recommendations. This is an uphill battle all day, every day. And just do your best. Maybe share. I don't know. There's no solution here. But do your best. Maybe some fencing, maybe deer resistant plants. Deer will eat anything if they're hungry enough. But there are plenty of homemade sprays out there. Maybe try those. Good luck fighting against the deer. It's an unending battle. keep that in mind when you are planning your rain garden. Okay, we're doing great. 8:03, plenty of time for questions. So rain gardens are really good at managing stormwater at the source. They are treating stormwater water quality, they are infiltrating stormwater water quantity, and they're doing all of this before it even becomes runoff and becomes a problem right at the source. The plants themselves are providing aesthetically pleasing benefits, as well as managing contaminants, as well as providing the habitat and the food source for all of our pollinators and our very important caterpillars and all the foods that our songbirds and our other birds are eating. So please consider installing a rain garden. They are relatively low maintenance. And as I stated before, they can be installed anywhere. Here are my two extremes. Here's my pocket rain garden in Newark on the left. And then in Maplewood at the Hilton Branch Library, our 2,000 square foot rain garden. So they're adaptable, they're flexible, and they can be whatever you want them to be. So thank you guys. I got some of this material from these folks, and then here is my information. If you have any questions, I'm still not in the office full time because of our pandemic, so please email me if you need anything. And now I'm here to take questions.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. Just get myself back up here. So we do have a few questions.
Okay.
First of all, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but this presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to see it afterwards. It will get posted online, and you'll get an email link to that. It'll also be on the NJFA website, I believe. So let's start out with some of the questions from the Q&A that were a little more general, and then we'll hone into more specific stuff. So first of all, Clark asked, does a rain garden have to include vegetation? He saw what he took to be a rain garden fenced next to a Costco parking lot. It was large and it had no vegetation.
I would say if it didn't have vegetation, it technically wasn't a rain garden, but it may have been a drainage swale, which is just, it could be just a ditch that is channeling water, directing water a certain way, or infiltrating water. But in general, our definition of rain garden does require plants. It's not just soil. I'm actually curious what Clark saw. Was it just bare soil? But yeah, we do define rain gardens as being vegetated. They do require the plants because the plants provide a lot of benefits and define that rain garden.
Thank you for that. Somebody else asked, can you negatively affect existing wetlands by installing a rain garden nearby?
So that's a really good question. I would say it depends, which is a horrible answer. It doesn't get you very far, but it would depend on what runoff you're capturing, what contaminants you have, how close, when you say nearby, how close are we talking? And again, I apologize that this is a vague answer, but everything really is situational. But in general, the benefits of the rain garden would outweigh any risks because those layers of the rain garden are removing contaminants. So any water that eventually makes it down to the receiving water or to those underlying wetlands should be relatively high water quality. But again, it depends on what water is going in there. Like, is it is it a parking lot for a maintenance area of the DPW and it's all oil and you know what I mean? It really depends on how, you know, what you're draining, what you're working with. But generally, the rain garden will provide benefits to the wetlands rather than risks.
Makes sense. Same person asked, when creating a rain garden, can you also create a wetland, but that can then be regulated by the DEP under the wetland protection laws?
So rain gardens should not be permanently wet. Your rain garden needs to be infiltrating within 24 to 48 hours of a storm event. This is not a wetland. It is not standing water. It is not a detention area. That we want this to infiltrate quickly. If you you should not be creating wetlands with your rain garden. The rain garden is really just a temporary holding facility, and then that water is ending up, you know, in the groundwater or flowing to existing wetlands. It's if your rain garden is functioning properly, you are not creating wetlands. This is a dry, almost all of the time, this installation is dry, which is why you have to choose the plants carefully and you're not using wetland plants. So I do not think you could create. There is a way that you could if you designed your rain garden poorly, but as we specify and define rain gardens, you are not creating wetlands, no.
Okay. Just as a brief aside, to go back to Clark's question, he said that it was not just a swale, it was a large area with rocks on top, and he got the impression the size of the rocks got smaller the deeper it went. That does actually sound like a swale to me.
Yeah, that may be a swale or maybe something like a dry well.
So
only
I know some swales,
exposed.
some built swales do have gravel in them for sure. So
Yeah. So there are vegetated swales and there are unvegetated. Excuse me. So it may have just been a gravel swale. But I'm really glad that it was not just excuse me, that it was not just exposed soil, because that would have been problematic. So I'm glad. Yeah.
And he said, yes, more like a dry well.
Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of an in-between what you're describing. It's not what we call green infrastructure, which uses vegetation and uses biology and plants and those kinds of things to manage stormwater, but it's not quite gray infrastructure, which is used to describe traditional. You're kind of in between the two with something like that.
Makes sense. So Clark also asked, in your plant lists, do you promote or mention making the rain garden dual purpose by planting it as a pollinator garden on top?
Many of the plants that we recommend are good for pollinators. Again, we're mostly recommending native. We are definitely, those native plants are much better for pollinators in general, for our native pollinators. Obviously, honeybees are a different beast, but yes, we highly recommend pollinator rain gardens, and many of the plants that are in our plant lists are that dual purpose. They are doing well at uptaking nutrients and things like that, as well as providing food sources for our pollinators. And I was going to pull up the rain garden manual. Hold on. So can you see this, or am I still on my PowerPoint here?
Still on the PowerPoint for now.
hold on. I think I need to do a new share. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so
There we go.
the Rain Garden Manual of New Jersey was put out by the Rutgers Water Resources Program, which is Chris Abrupta's group. And at the very end of that, and I will send a link to Kieran and Lori to share with you guys, are the plant lists, some rain garden design samples. And yes, I mean, you can see that this one, deer tolerant rain garden, plants that are deer tolerant, resistant, plants for wildlife habitat, plants that deer prefer, don't use those. So there are lots of recommendations here. And again, most of these are good for our pollinators. So I will send that to you guys and you can take a look.
That is awesome. Speaking of sending stuff to us, another Thomas asked, can these slides be made available to show to other environmental commissioners?
Sure, yes, please. show them to the world. Rutgers is not afraid to share. So please, whatever you need, I will send the slide set and the Forestry Association can get them out to you guys.
Yeah, so Thomas, just contact us through the Forestry Association. I believe everybody can at least get to Lori through the NJ Forestry website. And we'll make sure we get those slides over to you. All right. Then we've got Juanita asked, they have to work in a rain garden that has not been taken care of for 2 years. Should they remove everything? Currently, it's all weeds.
If you are 100% sure that it is all weeds, then yes, absolutely. Just start over. Clean slate. But 2 years isn't terribly long. I'm not sure how long the rain garden was established before it was abandoned. Are you sure there's no perennials in there?
Not sure.
Really take a look. Okay, you are sure? Okay.
No, she said she's not sure.
Oh, she's not. Yeah, really get in there. Many of the plants that Rutgers recommends are blooming right now. So maybe take a look. Look for those cone flowers, those irises. What else is going right now? The bee balm, the monarda. What else have I seen blooming right now? The black-eyed Susans are probably out right now. Yeah, take a look. Really, I know, I'm sorry, it's annoying, but I would go through and be careful and really take a look. Because if you don't have to start over, then that'd be great. Because obviously those perennials are established, which you don't want to rip them out now. But really take a look. And if you have questions, there are lots of apps available that show, you know, what plant is this? And you take a picture and you have an answer within a minute. So I can send some recommended plant apps for that, like plant ID apps that can help you decide, is this a weed or is this something that someone planted? So yeah, really, I would recommend taking it slow and just see really what you've got, because if it's been 2 years and there's anything in there, it's really going to be established at this point. So don't pull it out if you don't have to.
Yeah, it's sort of the downside of trying to reclaim something like that. It's just going to take a while. That stuff.
I know.
Slow.
Yeah, it's tricky, and I know it can be overwhelming because the weeds, they do pop up and take over really quickly. But if there's anything in there, it's worth saving.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else said that they're puzzling over putting a rain garden to collect runoff from the roof because they previously read that rain gardens should not be installed near the foundation, but several feet away. How far away should it be, and what goes in between?
Yeah, so we recommend at least 10 feet. And I know that that can be tight depending on your lot and, you know, what else you have going on. If you have a tree, if you have, you know, it's a lot to squish in a, you know, in a tight space if you don't have a lot of room. But we really do recommend 10 feet. And you can install a pipe from your downspout to the rain garden. You can bury it. You could do river rock if you want, but most people install a pipe, and it doesn't have to be that deep, just enough to not get caught on your lawnmower or to trip somebody. But yeah, that's very common, is to connect the downspout to a buried pipe or you know, a trench, depending on if you're mowing there. You know, it's situational for sure, but you really don't want to be infiltrating back into your foundation, into your basement, into your house. So it might be tricky with all of those things. But yeah, please be careful. I know it can be tempting, but you don't want to create another problem.
Makes sense. Carol asked if they can put a rain garden. So they have a property that has a stormwater easement that runs through the yard and leads to a storm drain in the street. And it collects in an area that stays wet for the day. So it sounds like it doesn't stay wet forever. Sounds like it stays wet for the day. And Carol, you can put something in the chat or the Q&A if I'm not understanding you correctly. But so she wanted to suggest some rain garden plants. Is that a good idea in an area that stays wet for the day after a rain event? Sure.
Yeah. So when I send you this document, the manual that has the plant list, I don't know if you can still see my screen. So there's rain garden plants by rain garden zone. And so for your not problem, but for your stormwater easement with this wet area, if it's drained within 1 day of a rain event, that is exactly the definition of a base plant, something that can handle the wet conditions, but is mostly under dry conditions. So there are grasses and ground covers for the base. There are wildflowers and ferns for the base here, and then trees and shrubs. You're probably not going to put a tree, but maybe a shrub would be cool. There's lots of really neat bushes and shrubs that you could put in. So take a look at anything that is for the base. And it sounds like it would be perfect for your situation.
Thanks for that. Another question I thought was interesting. Would using the wetland delineations for plants, so FAC, wet, I think FAC is facilitative, right?
Yeah, facultative.
Facultative, and then obligated indicator status help in locating plants in the different zones of the rain garden? Or should they just, this isn't in our question, should they just go to the manual that you're going to send? Is that more reliable?
Yeah, so we actually don't recommend using the wetland status, just because we're not recommending wetland plants. You're really, you know, those wetland delineated plants, you know, there's obligate wetlands means they need to be wet all the time. We want to avoid those completely. And I would recommend just use our New Jersey Rain Garden Manual, or there's another manual, the Native Plant Society of New Jersey also has really amazing information, and I'll send that also. But yeah, just look at the zone lists and just use that, because the wetland indicators, I just don't want you to possibly get into you know, a situation where you're not putting the right plant in the right place. We do not want any obligate wetland plants. You know, some of the other categories may work. And actually, I think this manual does mention the wetland status. Hold on. But if you are familiar with that classification, then I feel like you could get away with it. But if you don't really know the difference between all the categories, I wouldn't chance it. But it's up to you. If you're an expert, then you already know what to do, and avoid obligate wetlands. Look at the facultative. Look at some of the uplands. Yeah, sure, you could do that for sure. But for the average person, I wouldn't get confused by all of that. Hold on, I thought they had that somewhere in this manual, but now I can't find it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. You could definitely choose plants that way, but I think it's a little complicated for what we're trying to do here. Oh, here
Makes
it is.
sense.
Yeah. So there is a graphic that is showing the obligate and the facultative and the upland plants, and they do translate it from wet to dry. So you could take a look at that, but again, I think it's a little confusing for the average person.
Gotcha. We have about 5 minutes left. And some of these, I think there's still a lot of good questions. I think some of them are going to be relatively quick too. So maybe we can get through a few more.
Okay.
John said that he has a home that sits above a retaining wall, as does most of the non-tree covered portion of the lot. Are there special concerns or issues with infiltrating additional water uphill of retaining walls? Or is this just like a non-starter of a location?
I have never really encountered that question. Let me think. I mean, I would think if your retaining wall is actually retaining water and holding water back from something, that you wouldn't want to infiltrate any more water into that retaining and into that pressure. But if it is something that's a little more decorative, or if it's something that is more structural rather than actually, people use the term retaining wall to describe all kinds of things. But if that wall is actually holding water back from doing damage on someone else's property, I would avoid installing a rain garden upstream of that. But if it's something decorative, or if you have acres and acres of space and your little rain garden is draining 10,000 gallons, or like if you've got some room and your retention wall is really just structural rather than acting as a dam or something like that, then you could consider it. But again, many of these questions are site specific. So if you have a more detailed description, or if you want to talk to me about this, please contact me directly.
Great. And then Michael asked, can you put a rain garden in a retention or detention basin?
So not exactly is my very vague answer. There are naturalized detention basins where they plant plants and they remove concrete, and they kind of make the basin itself a very large scale rain garden. It's not exactly a rain garden, but it's moving in that direction. And many detention or retention basins do have turf, or have at least some vegetation in them. But in terms of, installing a rain garden like in the middle of it or something like that, that's not really something that's done in the industry or in practice. Most installations that are becoming naturalized are just planted on top of the concrete, or the concrete is removed and the vegetation is installed on whatever's underneath. So you're kind of headed in that direction, but it's not a true rain garden in the sense that we've been discussing here.
Yeah, and Joanne put in the chat that they had that question in a green infrastructure class with Chris Abrupta, and the basins are required to hold water and never dry. So that would.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Joanne, for adding that. Yeah, there are all kinds of specifications and requirements that those installations need to meet, and I forgot about that one, so thank you.
Somebody else asked, is there such thing as a shady rain garden, and what plants can be used? Yes,
there is a shady rain garden, and check out the list here in the Rain Garden Manual of New Jersey. Something that I've had some success with, hold on, let me find it. Ferns. Ferns are awesome for shady rain gardens. There are so many ferns. They do really well. And I love them. Please install ferns in your shade rain garden. But let me see what else they're recommending. So grasses, perennials. I don't know if you can see this. Oh yeah, columbine is a beautiful perennial that's native to New Jersey. It can be tricky to find, but that's another thing that does well in our shady rain gardens. Phlox, yes, I forgot about phlox. Phlox is a very nice looking flower. Sometimes it's used for ground cover, depending on which variety you have. So that's another good one. But yeah, look at these ferns, look at these grasses, arrowwood viburnum, spicebush is a really nice grass. Yeah, and then most people don't put trees in their rain gardens, but yeah, these recommendations are here for you if you need them. But yeah, I would really recommend ferns. They're really cool and they're something different, and they do really well in shady rain gardens.
They're usually pretty deer resistant too, aren't they?
Yeah, that's also true. Yep.
I think that's all the time we have. We're at 8:30, but we pretty much got to all the questions. There were a couple more, but for those of you we didn't get to, if you want to email us or email Amy, we can try to address your questions that way. So again, thank you so much. We had a lot of comments just saying thank you and great job, and this was excellent as well. So it was a hit.
All right. Well, thanks for having me again. And yeah, I will send you some resources, and please get them out to everybody. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you so much. And what were you saying, Andy?
I just wanted to thank you, Kieran, and Amy. It was very good. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks once again to Amy. And everybody have a great night. We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.